In order to continue supporting Ukraine, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has underlined the importance of strengthening ammunition stockpiles and more joint procurements. He noted that NATO allies have provided Ukraine with support worth nearly 150 billion euros over the past year, of which 65 billion euros has been military support. He adds that NATO-EU cooperation continues to be vital in supporting Ukraine and protecting shared values.
We meet at a critical time for our security. Russia's war of aggression grinds on against Ukraine. And over the last weeks and months, we have seen fierce fighting in and around Bakhmut. And what we see is that Russia is throwing in more troops, more forces. And what Russia lacks in quality, they try to make up in quantity. They have suffered big losses, but at the same time, Bakhmut may eventually fall in the coming days. And therefore, it is also important to highlight that this does not necessarily reflect any turning point of the war.
I am now being joined by the Director General of Bolitak Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Professor Bola Akinterinwa. Good to have you join us, Prof.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So we've seen a wave of attacks, perhaps the biggest in recent times, on Ukrainian cities like Odessa, Kyiv, and Kharkiv. And we're also seeing the battle on the Russian side to take Bakhmut, and the battle on the Ukrainian side to defend Bakhmut. Where do you see things heading, Prof?
Well, I think we should be talking about probably the beginning of an end. And the beginning of an end should not be misconstrued, should not be misunderstood to mean end to the conflict. End in the context of a new strategic objective. They are beginning. In this case, what has actually happened is that the Russians have launched 81 missiles, 81. And the 81 missiles included what they call Kinzhal ballistic missiles. Missiles that have been targeted at, not just military infrastructure, but which, for instance, the Ukrainian authorities have not been able to contain, to foresee in advance. So what is actually happening is that the war appears to be deepening in a new fashion. So where are we heading to? Yes, the military lull, the political lull, that's where we are heading to. Why? The reason cannot be far-fetched. We have the NATO countries that have been aiding, providing logistic assistance, taking sanctionary measures against Russia. But at the end of the day, and day after day, Ukraine has been the victim, suffering massive destruction. Look at the reason Russia has given, that this massive attack is simply to suggest that, look, Ukraine shouldn't have engaged in what it called border incursion. Border incursion. Where? Bryansk. So, why will Ukraine not be in a position, first of all, to defend its own survival, its own self-preservation?
If I may just quickly comment, because I think you were also speaking about the different players, whether active or not in this war, in terms of the NATO countries, Europe and America. But I was listening earlier because there is a stance as to how to end this war or not in Ukraine and Russia as well. But I was listening to the former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, who has said, look, the best way, the best negotiation they can have is through continuous fighting. He called the military, the officers of the military, the best negotiators. What options do you think are available to Ukraine and Russia in ending this war?
Well, I think that the Ukrainian president should simply recognize the fact that his country is the main victim, and by so doing, accept to negotiate with Russia. The Ukrainian president has said that he does not trust the Russian leader, that he could not be reliable, and therefore he does not imagine a situation whereby he can sit tete-a-tete, with him and be discussing. I think this is a miscalculated strategy. In this particular case, if, for instance, Ukraine has the military capacity to withstand Russia without the assistance of European countries and NATO, it will be a different kettle of fish entirely. But the issue now is that those who are sustaining Ukraine to fight, they do not want to engage themselves in it. They are only providing assistance. But the victims are not Europeans, they are not Americans, they are not NATO countries. They are basically Ukrainian people. So if we are to find a solution,
if Ukraine doesn't fight this war to the end and perhaps claim victory, will it ever be able to? What about? I think what I'm trying to ask you is that will its independence not be at stake? Would it? Because people are saying, look, Ukraine needs to fight this war to be able to enjoy some level of independence from Russia.
Well, you see, when you fight, you do not only fight with weapons. All right? You can fight even with what they call soft power. The fact is that the sovereignty of Ukraine, which is being bandied around at one level, is there. What the Russians are saying from the literature is not that Ukraine cannot exist as an independent and sovereign state, but they do not want an independent sovereign state to be detrimental to the security of Russia. That's the issue. And the problem is not even a war between Russia and Ukraine per se. It's a war between Russia and the NATO countries and the European countries. So they can negotiate that. The bottom line, you see, there is the principle of sanctity of agreements, pacta sunt servanda. When you do an agreement, you must be faithful to it. Russia is complaining that the European countries, the NATO countries that agreed initially that there will not be an expansion of the NATO to the borders near Russia. They have not complied with that. So these are the issues that can be negotiated at the level of diplomatic ministries, and it can be done. But if Ukraine wants to fight, do the battle, I am saying you must have the means without necessarily depending 100% on others. If you are capable, 60%, 70%.
I'm sorry to interject because I do have to wrap up the conversation, but we'll continue to see whether
it's all right.
Whether Ukraine has the means or not, especially with the supply of weapons from the West. Thank you so much for talking to us. Director General, Bola Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Professor Bola Akinterinwa.
Thank you. Thank you.